Hi, I'm Denise with Romantic Recollections. Welcome to the first video in my series on getting started with machine embroidery. The information that will be in this series is also available as a free online class, so if you'd rather get access to it all at once, the link to the class is in the description below. Today I want to talk about the most exciting and possibly the scariest step, buying your first embroidery machine. So of course, the first question people always ask is, which machine should I buy? You're probably hoping I can take all the stress out of this process for you and that I can just point you towards the perfect machine. Unfortunately, I really can't do that. The machine that might be absolutely perfect for me may not work for you or your budget at all. And the other thing is, machines are changing all the time. They're constantly adding new features, new models, and the information that I give today might be outdated in 6 months or a year. So instead, because I want this video to have some usefulness for a longer frame of time, I'm going to talk more about how you make this decision than exactly which machine you should be buying. Luckily, most brands today make really great embroidery machines. I've heard a few reservations about Singer, but all the other brands are really great. So whether you go with Viking or Baby Lock, Brother, whoever it is, chances are you're going to get a great machine. I personally use a Husqvarna Viking diamond that is several years old. It's not the Diamond Deluxe. They upgraded to that after I purchased mine, so it's not the top of the line anymore. And I'll say just up front for clarity that as of the time of this recording, I have absolutely no relationship with Viking other than as a happy customer. However, I will be talking about my own experiences with that brand in the video. Another question that frequently comes up is, I was given an older embroidery machine. Can I use it? And the answer to that isn't always so simple. So there's a few questions that you need to ask if you've been given an older machine. First off, how do you transfer designs from your computer to the machine? A lot of older machines had proprietary technology. This was either floppy disks or proprietary USB sticks that you needed in order to transfer those designs. So if you don't have access to those floppy drives, or if that USB stick got lost, you may not actually have a way to get designs into the machine. The second question is, does that process require any specialized software? Today, most machines are really simple and just drag and drop onto any USB stick. They usually do come with one, but the older the machine, the more likely it is that it needed some sort of transfer software where you could see the designs and then transfer them onto that floppy disk. In which case, does that software run on an updated computer? So for my very first embroidery machine, at some point I ran into the problem that the software that I used to transfer designs could only run on a version of Windows that was no longer supported. This meant that it wasn't safe to use that machine to buy things on the internet because that machine was completely open to viruses. In the long run, that meant that I had to keep around an older laptop just to do this transfer process. I had to buy designs on a different machine, transfer them to that laptop, transfer them to the USB stick, and then put them in machine. And this really wasn't ideal. It became a very cumbersome process as the software aged and that version of Windows wasn't supported anymore. So this is definitely a factor with using older machines. You'll need a reliable method of transferring designs between your computer and your embroidery machine. And even if you were given a stack of old floppy disks, without the proper equipment and software, you have no idea what's really on them. They may be full of teddy bear designs, and if you do historical costuming, that's not going to be really helpful with what you want to make. So you need to make sure that you can transfer new designs into your machine. The last question that I would really ask is, what size hoop does that machine have? A lot of older machines had a maximum hoop size of 4 inches by 4 inches, and that's pretty small by today's standards. Now, it's not a hard and fast limit. You can do amazing things with a 4 by 4 hoop. However, it is pretty small, and a lot of designs today are designed for a 5 by 7 inch hoop or larger. If you do have access to an older machine, it's definitely worth taking a look at it and seeing if this is going to be useful for you. You may need a few more skills with using smaller designs. You may need some specialized software or some older transfer methods, but it may still be perfectly fine. If you find that it's just not working for you, or it's too confusing, or it's just really clunky at this point, it may be best to consider that machine for a trade-in offer, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the video. Another question a lot of people ask is, should I buy Digitizing Software when I buy my machine? And my short answer is no. Just wait. I'll have a whole video on nothing but software and I'll give you more of my reasons then. But the really short answer is, you're just starting out. Wait and find out what you really need before you spend that money. If you're concerned that you can't actually use your machine without the software they're trying to sell you, I wouldn't worry about that too much. They're not going to sell you a machine that you can't use. If there's software that's actually required for your machine to work properly, it's probably bundled with your machine. The software they're usually trying to sell you is digitizing software for editing or creating your own designs, and this can run upwards of $1,000. So if you're just starting out and making this investment, that's a lot of money to add on top of the purchase price of the machine, especially when you're not sure yet whether you're going to use it. So like I said, short answer, just wait and find out what you really need before you spend the money. So let's talk about the questions you should be asking to find out which machine is right for you. The first question that I really want you to consider is this going to be for a hobby or for a business? Now, you may have never even considered having an embroidery business until you step into that store. And you look at the price tag on that machine and you think, oh boy, that's pretty steep. Maybe if I took some commissions, I could get the machine to help pay for itself. And while that's not a terrible idea, it's also not an idea that's for everyone. So let's talk a little bit about the realities of making that decision. Now, first off, the machine that's right for you as a hobbyist may not be the right machine for you as a business owner. So as a hobbyist, you may be looking for a machine that has a lower price point that you can afford. You know that you're not going to be making any money off of this, so it has to be a comfortable purchase for where you're at now. So you may not be looking at some really high-end features that would save you time and make the process more streamlined. You probably don't even really know what those features are when you're buying your first machine. On the other hand, if you're going to be doing this as a business, time is going to be critical. Even though an embroidery machine is a lot faster than stitching things by hand, it still takes time. It could take you 5, 10, 20 hours to stitch out certain designs. And that's all time that you have to account for if this is going to be a business. Now, some things take up more time than others. Changing threads takes a lot of time, hooping designs takes a lot of time. So features that make that faster, like having a multi-head machine where you can put 6 or 10 colors of thread on the machine and not have to stop and change them, that saves you a lot of time. Same thing with bigger hoops. The fewer times you have to stop and move the hoop on the fabric, the faster the whole process is going to be. However, a machine with 6 heads and a really giant hoop size is not going to be the beginner machine for a hobbyist. So if you're buying that entry-level machine because it's got the price point you're comfortable with, you may find that it just slows you down immensely if you're trying to do this as a business. Now, aside from the upfront cost of the machine, there are some other considerations that go into running an embroidery business. So first off is time. If you really do have a design that takes 20 hours to stitch out, how often can you afford to stitch that out for a commission? 20 hours a week is roughly 3 hours a day. Do you have that time to do 1 commission a week? 1 commission a month? How much is that going to impact the time you have for your own personal projects? And then even if you do stitch that design out, it takes 20 hours to stitch, but then you also have to factor in fabric, thread, stabilizer. You probably had to take pictures, deal with emails, packing and shipping. When you get done with all of that, you might be looking at least a $200 price tag for that item. Is anybody actually buying a $200 item? And if they are you actually making above minimum wage? You might find that after you subtract all of that out, even $200 means you're making far less money than you would if you looked at this from some other angle. And those aren't the only considerations that go into having a business. You're going to need to think about business licenses, taxes, and a whole bunch of other things that may cut into that profit even further. So in the long run, you may find that having a business isn't necessarily the best choice. You might be able to afford that machine a little bit more easily with a different part-time job or some extra shifts at your current job, or finding some other way to make it work rather than just jumping in and deciding that the best way to pay it off is with a business. There's really no wrong or right answer here. You may decide you love embroidery so much that you're so passionate about it that you do want to start an embroidery business, and that's great. It just shouldn't be a decision you make in a split second when looking at the price of the machine in the shop. So I'd really encourage you to be honest with yourself and give it some thought before you're standing there trying to make that decision. Next, I want to talk about some of the features that you'll have to consider as you're deciding which machine is right for you. So first, display. Embroidery machine displays range from small black and white displays all the way up to big, beautiful, full-color touchscreens. Generally speaking, the more expensive the machine, the bigger and fancier the display is. And obviously, this drives the price of the machine. Now, Most people can probably get by with that black and white display even if it's not as attractive, but this is something you might want to consider. Not everyone is going to look at that and really clearly visualize what that display is showing them. If you feel confused or you have eyesight issues that make it really hard to read that display, chances are that you're not going to use your machine as much as you wanted to. So even though it might mean stepping up to a more expensive machine, if you truly need a color display for some reason, that's definitely something to consider. Go ahead and have them show you the display on a few different models while you're shopping so that you can figure out which one really works best for you. Another feature you'll want to consider is alignment. So what features does this machine have that will help you line up designs exactly where you want them? Some of the lower end machines may only give you a template to help you line it up inside of a hoop. Most machines will stitch out around the edges of the design, which is more or less helpful depending on the design. Some of them give you a better on-screen display, and some even have a camera built in that will take a picture of the fabric in your hoop and display the image hovering over it so that you know it's placed exactly in the right position. Now, a camera display is obviously going to be in a high-end machine with a bigger price point, but it does make things really simple. So this is another feature that's really going to impact both the price that you pay for the machine and how easy the machine is to operate. You should definitely have a salesperson demonstrate this for you on a couple different machines. If you want to know how to center a design on a pocket or repeat a border along a hem, ask them if they have any designs that they could at least show you how that would work on that machine. Chances are they do have a few built-in designs that they can easily demonstrate, and they can show you, well, here we go, let's have a piece of fabric, this is how I would center it on this piece of fabric, or this is how I would line it up along the edge. And they can walk you through those features, and maybe it's a little bit different on different brands of machines, and that might help guide your choice. In addition to alignment, another feature to consider is rotation. So how does this machine allow you to rotate the design once it's already loaded into the machine? A lot of the lower end ones may only allow rotation at 90 degrees at a time, which means you can do a big adjustment like turning it sideways to fit in your hoop, but you really can't do any minor adjustments. What this means for you in a practical sense is you have to hoop that fabric absolutely perfectly straight on grain if you want this design to line up perfectly. Now, that's not impossible, and there's a lot of tips and tricks that will help you with that, but some people get more frustrated with this than others. If spatial reasoning sometimes is a little bit difficult for you, you may want something that allows you a little bit more flexibility so that you're not spending more time hooping than you are embroidering. When I upgraded from my first machine to my second, I went from having a 90-degree rotation to a 1-degree rotation ability, and this saved me so much time. I can't tell you how often I would hoop something and put it in the machine to realize that it was just a couple degrees off of perfectly straight. I didn't expect that feature to be such a game changer because honestly with my first machine I didn't know what I was missing out on. But once I had the ability to rotate a design just 1 or 2 degrees to fit it perfectly where it needed to go, it saved me so much time on hooping. It made the process a lot more enjoyable and relaxed, and I spent more time embroidering than I did fighting with my fabric. Again, you know yourself best. If you're really a naturally precise person and that doesn't sound so bad, you're probably right. On the other hand, if you get really frustrated by setbacks and having to restart something because you didn't do it just exactly right, then this might be an area where a 90-degree rotation may be more frustrating for you. There's again no right or wrong answer, it's just the best fit for you. Another feature that plays into ease of use is hoop size. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of older machines had a maximum hoop size of about 4 by 4 inches. Today, a lot of machines also have a 5 by 7 inch hoop, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. Now, you can make practically anything in a 4 by 4 hoop, and I've seen some really amazing projects done in hoops that size. However, it may take a little bit more perseverance. Now, as a designer myself, I try to keep my designs accessible to everyone as often as I can. So if I can make a design fit into a 4 inch by 4 inch hoop, I do. So I have some borders in my shop that are only 2 inches by 3 inches, and that fits into a small hoop just fine. But other designs are too big for that to be realistic. So for example, my 18th century pocket has about 7 pieces, and you have to nest them together in order to create the entire pocket design. If I were to do that in a 4 inch by 4 inch hoop, you'd probably have over 20 pieces that needed to fit together. That's a lot less user-friendly, and that's a lot more difficult to package up and to create instructions for. So I simply opted to go with that larger hoop size of a 5 by 7 inch hoop because they are becoming so common. And I realize that can be frustrating if you only have a 4 inch by 4 inch hoop. And again, this isn't a roadblock, it just takes more skill and patience and probably some extra software in order to be able to use those designs that are too big for that 4 by 4 inch hoop. And that kind of challenge just isn't for everyone. Another great question to ask yourself before you get too far into the purchasing process is, do you need a machine that sews and embroiders, or would an embroidery-only machine work for you? So if you already have a sewing machine that you love that works great, or maybe you love your vintage machine and you don't really need a new sewing machine, you may find that an embroidery-only machine works perfectly for you. So if you don't actually need it to be a dual function machine, this is going to save you a lot of money. There aren't as many embroidery-only machines on the market, but the ones that are there are more equivalent to a mid-range sewing and embroidery machine for a fraction of the cost. I've seen some that start with a 5 by 7 inch hoop and some nice looking features for anywhere between $800 and $1,500. That's a far cry from the $4,000 to $5,000 that a lot of combo machines start at. So again, if you don't need a dual purpose machine, then definitely consider getting an embroidery only machine. The last question I'd have you consider is, do you already have brand loyalty to a specific brand? Do you love the sewing machine you already have? If you switch to an embroidery machine by the same company, you may find that it's just that much more comfortable and familiar when you start learning how to use the embroidery machine. Maybe the buttons look the same or switches are in the same place, and it just makes the whole process feel a little bit more familiar right from the start. And that can be really nice. The other question would be, have you already invested in additional tools and gadgets for that sewing machine that might work with a combination sewing and embroidery machine? So for example, when I bought my first embroidery machine, I also started using it for my primary sewing machine. So not only did I buy additional hoops and gadgets for embroidery, I also invested in machine feet and extra bobbins and all sorts of things that were great for sewing. So by the time I was ready to upgrade, I had a real consideration in, I've spent so much money on added gadgets. What happens if I switch brands? Did I want to hold on to the Viking just for sewing, in which case my extra hoops wouldn't work? Did I want to keep those extra hoops and use them with another Viking? And it definitely changed the decision for me. So if you've been the customer of a particular brand for years and you have a lot invested into that machine and you're already really comfortable with it, that might be the most logical place for you to start looking, because you might be able to carry over a lot of items to a new sewing and embroidery combo machine, or you just might feel more familiar. On the other hand, it's a lot easier to make that jump if you really have no brand loyalty in the beginning. You're going to find the best brand for you without trying to tie it into things that you already have existing. But it's a great question to consider so that you can at least narrow down your focus when you're first starting out. All of the features I've just discussed fall somewhere on a continuum. The lower end machines are going to have smaller hoops and simpler displays and fewer options, and the more expensive machines are going to have more bells and whistles. And there's really no right or wrong answer. All of them are going to help you do amazing things with embroidery. The question is really, which features do you personally need to make this feel like an exciting, fun, easy experience? The more frustrated you are with the machine, the more likely you are that you're going to shove it in the back of the closet. And yes, that happens. I've heard from a lot of people that they have an embroidery machine that they purchased or were given, and they've let it sit in the back of the closet for years because they were too intimidated or too frustrated when they tried to use it. Buying an embroidery machine is a really big investment, and I want you to be able to use it. So this isn't a question of like, what's the biggest and best thing that you need, but just a chance to really think through like what your particular skill sets and frustrations are, and look for a machine that's going to play to those so that you have the absolute best fit for you. Before I wrap this up, I want to give you 2 more tips that I hope will help you get not only the best machine for you, but also the best price for that machine. So tip number 1, don't pay for features that you're not going to use. Machines today have so many different bells and whistles, and they add these features so that you'll be tempted to buy their machine over a different machine. But if you're looking at these features and wondering when or if you'll ever use them, then you probably won't. Don't pay extra for a machine that has something fancy added on just because it sounds like a great deal. So for example, when I was shopping for my most recent machine, there was one that had a built-in camera and a ton of preloaded Disney designs. I was a little on the fence about the camera, but I knew for sure I wasn't going to use those Disney designs. Instead, I was interested in bigger hoop sizes and easier alignment options and rotation options, and so that's what I based my decision on. If I were looking for a new machine today, I would probably be looking for something that made the back of my work just as beautiful as the front, because as a historical costumer, I want to do more projects like sheer fichus where the back of my work might show. On the other hand, if you're never going to stitch anything sheer or where the back might show, that feature may not even be appealing. So again, focus on the features that you know you will truly use and just ignore the rest. Even when you're starting out, you have some idea of the projects you want to make, so don't pay for features that don't fit into those planned projects. The second tip is to take your time and shop around. This is a really big purchase and you want to make sure you're getting the most out of this investment. If you can, shop at a local sewing and vacuum store. Even if you have to drive a couple hours away to find a store in a bigger city, it's probably worth the drive. A lot of stores that specialize in sewing and embroidery carry multiple brands, and this can be really helpful because their salespeople have used all those brands and can talk specifically about the differences and the benefits of each brand. That means that you're not walking into a store that only sells baby lock, only to discover later that, gosh, that Viking was actually exactly what you wanted. A lot of these stores will also offer free lessons on how to use your new machine. Sometimes this is for a certain amount of time after your purchase, and others just do it no matter when and where you bought your machine. This can be huge, especially if you're not really confident just opening up the manual and working through it. Some of these stores may even have upgrade and trade-in programs. The ones that I've seen allow you to trade in your machine during the first year of ownership for a more expensive machine and get the entire purchase price of your original machine applied towards that new one. Which means if you bought a $2,000 machine today, you could go back for a $3,000 machine next year and you're already $2,000 into the purchase price. This can make it possible for you to start today with a lower end machine and slowly upgrade it over 2 or 3 years to get to that higher end machine that you really wanted. They may also let you trade in a machine you no longer use for a significant discount, especially if they're having a big sale. When I bought my Viking Diamond, I was able to bring in any machine for a trade-in value of $2,500 off the purchase price, which was nearly 25% of its value, so that was huge. And I didn't have to trade in my older embroidery machine in order to get the discount. They truly meant any machine. I brought in a $100 Kenmore that I bought when I was right out of high school and had been sitting in the garage for years, and they still gave me the full trade-in value even though that machine was worth nowhere near that amount. So if you have a little time to wait for a good trade-in event, that might also help you get a really great discount on the machine you want. And because these stores have such a high volume and so much turnover, they can also offer really great deals and specials. Sometimes they'll have sales, sometimes they may offer special financing. I know I have seen something like 4 or 5 years of no interest financing offered on these machines, which is great for people who have the credit to utilize. With all those trade-ins that they're taking, they also usually have a number of slightly older or refurbished machines at a significantly reduced price. You might pay 40 or 50% less for a machine because it's a floor model or a couple of years old, but it's still a great machine, and that can be another really good way to save money. Quite often, some of the same upgrade programs or special financing also apply for those refurbished machines. So I would definitely recommend finding out if there are any big sewing and vacuum stores in your area. I would get on their mailing list and really start to watch what kind of deals they offer and then time your purchase so that you can get the best value possible. If you made it this far, I want to thank you so much for watching with me today. I hope I answered some of your questions and helped you feel a little bit more confident about making this big and exciting purchase. If you still have questions about buying your first embroidery machine or other questions about getting started with machine embroidery, go ahead and pop them in the comments and check out my online class and the future videos in this series. I hope I can answer all of your questions there. Thank you so much. Bye.